The great chamber on Nexus Prime had never been so quiet. Ambassador Hana stood at the center of the circular room, her crystal-like body shaking with fear. Around her, representatives from dozens of alien species watched in silence. The holographic display above her head showed something that made everyone's blood run cold. Star systems were going dark. One by one, entire worlds were disappearing from the galaxy's communication network. Where once there had been thriving civilizations, now there was only empty space and silence. Kiwan sat with the small human delegation near the back of the chamber. At 28, he was the youngest ambassador in Earth's history. Most of the other species barely acknowledged humans existed. Earth had only joined the Galactic Council 50 years ago, and many still saw them as primitive newcomers. Hannah's voice cracked as she spoke. Her people, the Velthara, were made of living crystal that could change color with their emotions. Right now, she was a deep purple that meant terror. 14 species have been completely destroyed, she said. The Korthani, the Belix, the Thermal, all gone. Their worlds are empty. Their cities are dust. We found no survivors, no bodies, nothing. It is as if they never existed at all. A ripple of fear went through the chamber. The Korthani had been one of the oldest civilizations in the galaxy. They had survived wars, plagues, and natural disasters for over 10,000 years. If they could be wiped out so completely, what hope did anyone else have? The hologram changed to show a dark shape moving between the stars. It was massive, bigger than most space stations. Around it, smaller shapes moved like hungry insects. We call them the Devourers, Hana continued. They came from the Outer Rim territories 6 months ago. At first, we thought they were just another aggressive species looking for new territory. But they do not want land or resources. They want everything. They consume entire worlds, breaking down matter itself until nothing remains. Kiwan leaned forward in his seat. The human delegation consisted of only 3 people, compared to the dozens that some other species brought. Earth was still learning how galactic politics worked. Ambassador Vorthak of the Luminari stood up. His people were beings of pure energy who had mastered technology beyond most species' understanding. When he spoke, his voice echoed with power. The Luminari have studied these Devourers, he said. Their technology is beyond our ability to understand or counter. We recommend immediate evacuation of all core worlds. This threat cannot be fought. Murmurs of agreement filled the chamber. If the Luminari, with all their advanced technology, said something was impossible, most species listened. The Menthari representative spoke next. Her people were powerful psychics who could read thoughts across vast distances. We have tried to make mental contact with these creatures. There is nothing there but hunger. They cannot be reasoned with, cannot be stopped. We must flee while we still can. One by one, the galaxy's greatest civilizations stood up to declare the same thing. The Zephyrians, who had ships faster than anything else in known space, were already preparing to run to distant galaxies. The Corvan Empire, which had never lost a war in 3,000 years, was loading their most important citizens onto evacuation ships. Each species that spoke made the situation sound more hopeless. The Devourers were too fast, too strong, too alien to be understood or defeated. The only option was to run and hope they could get far enough away to survive. Hana listened to each declaration with growing despair. Her crystal body was now almost black with grief. The Velthara homeworld was directly in the path of the Devourer advance. They had maybe 3 weeks before the enemy arrived, 3 weeks to save a civilization that had existed for 8,000 years. Please, she said when the last species had finished speaking. Is there no one who will help us? No one who will even try to fight these monsters? The chamber fell silent again. Kiwan could hear his own heartbeat in the quiet. Around him, aliens who commanded fleets of thousands of ships and ruled over billions of citizens looked at their feet. No one wanted to meet Hana's desperate gaze. Then Kiwan stood up. The sound of his chair scraping against the floor echoed in the massive chamber. Every eye turned to look at the young human. Some species had never seen a human before and stared with curiosity. Others looked annoyed that such a minor representative would dare to interrupt. "Ambassador Hana," Kiwan said, his voice steady despite the thousands of eyes watching him. "Earth would like to volunteer to investigate this threat." The silence that followed was different from before. This was not the silence of fear or respect. This was the silence of complete shock. Then someone laughed. It started as a small chuckle from one of the Corvan delegates, then spread through the chamber like a wave. Within seconds, dozens of species were laughing openly at the absurd suggestion. Humans? The species that had barely figured out faster than light. Travel? The newcomers who still used primitive chemical rockets for short-distance travel? They wanted to investigate a threat that had the galaxy's greatest civilizations running in terror? Ambassador Vorthak's energy form flickered with what might have been amusement. "Young human," he said, "your species has been in space for less than 200 years. The Luminari have existed since before your star was born. If we cannot face this threat, what makes you think you can?" Kiwan felt his cheeks burn with embarrassment, but he did not sit down. "Because we have nothing to lose," he said simply. "Every other species here has ancient civilizations, vast territories, billions of citizens to protect. You have everything to lose by taking risks. Humans are still small, still learning. If we fail, the galaxy loses very little. But if we succeed, or even if we just learn something useful about these devourers, it might help everyone else." The fool. Laughter died down, replaced by thoughtful murmuring. What the human said made a strange kind of sense. Earth had only 3 small colonies outside their home system. Humanity numbered in the billions, not the trillions like most galactic civilizations. They were expendable in a way that the great powers could never be. "You would send your people to die for strangers," said the Menthari representative, her psychic voice filled with surprise. "We sense no deception in you. You truly mean this offer?" Kiwan nodded. "We mean it. Give us whatever information you have about these devourers. Let us try where others cannot." Most of the delegates were already packing up to leave. The session was clearly over, and they had evacuations to organize. But Hana remained in the center of the chamber, her crystal form slowly shifting from black to a deep blue that meant hope mixed with sadness. As the great chamber emptied, she approached the human delegation. Up close, Kiwan could see that her crystal body was covered in tiny cracks, stress fractures from the fear and desperation she had been carrying. "You know this is likely suicide," she said quietly. "These devourers have destroyed civilizations 1,000 times more advanced than yours." Kiwan met her alien gaze without flinching. "Maybe. But everyone else has already given up. Sometimes the only choice left is the one that seems impossible." Hana stared at him for a long moment, then reached into her robes and pulled out a data crystal. "This contains everything we know about the devourers, their movement patterns, the wreckage they leave behind, the few sensor readings we managed to get before our ships were destroyed." She placed the crystal in Kiwan's hands. "I do not know if you are brave or foolish. Perhaps both. But you are the only hope my people have left." As the lights dimmed in the empty chamber, Kiwan looked down at the small crystal that contained humanity's first real challenge in the wider galaxy. In 3 days, he would return to Earth with news that would change everything. Humanity was about to face an enemy that had destroyed civilizations older than human recorded history. The question was not whether they could win. The question was whether they could learn something, anything, that might help the galaxy survive what was coming. Captain Do-hyun stared out at the empty space where the Kelthera trade station used to be. According to the star charts, this area should have been bustling with merchant ships and cargo haulers. Instead, there was nothing but twisted metal and silence. The UES Indomitable floated quietly among the wreckage, its sensors scanning for any signs of life. Behind them, two smaller human ships waited for orders. It was not much of a fleet, but it was all Earth could spare for this mission. "Captain," called Chief Engineer Mina from her station. "I'm reading some strange energy signatures from those ship fragments. The metal looks like it was dissolved, rather than destroyed." Do-hyun nodded grimly. This was the third destroyed station they had found in the past week. Each one told the same story. No explosion damage, no weapon burns, no signs of a battle. The ships and stations looked like they had been eaten away by acid, leaving behind only half-melted skeletons of metal. Weapons specialist Hyun-woo looked up from his console. "Sir, I've been studying the attack patterns. Whatever did this was incredibly precise. They targeted the power cores first, then the communication arrays, then the life support systems. These weren't random attacks. The Devourers knew exactly what they were doing. Dr. Yuna, the team's xenobiologist, was examining samples they had, collected from the previous sites. She had been quiet for most of the journey, but now she looked troubled. "Captain, I need to show you something," she said. "These residue samples contain traces of nanotechnology unlike anything in our databases. The molecular structure suggests they can break down any type of matter at the quantum level." Do-hyun felt a chill run down his spine. Nanotechnology that could dissolve anything was a terrifying weapon. But what worried him more was how organized these attacks seemed to be. The Devourers were not mindless monsters. They were intelligent, systematic, and deadly efficient. The journey to the Outer Rim had taken them 3 weeks. Earth's fastest ships were still slow compared to the advanced vessels used by older civilizations. But speed had not been the goal of this mission. They were here to learn, to gather information that might help the galaxy understand what they were facing. So far, the information was not encouraging. "Captain," Mina called out, "I'm detecting a massive gravitational anomaly ahead. It's unlike anything I've ever seen." On the main screen, the stars seemed to bend and twist around an area of space that looked completely empty, but the sensors told a different story. Something huge was there, something so massive it was warping space itself. "Take us closer," Do-hyun ordered, "but keep the engines ready for emergency jump." As they approached, the true horror of what they were facing became clear. The gravitational distortion was not empty space. It was a graveyard. Hundreds of ships floated in the twisted gravity field, all of them half dissolved like the stations they had seen before. But these were not merchant vessels or civilian transports. These were warships, massive battle cruisers. From a dozen different species, all of them destroyed in the same methodical way. "My God," whispered Hyun-woo. "Look at the size of some of these ships. That one there must be 5 kilometers long. It's a Corvan dreadnought." The Corvan Empire had not lost a ship in battle for over 1,000 years. Their dreadnoughts were considered the most powerful warships in the galaxy. Seeing one reduced to a dissolving wreck was like watching a mountain crumble to dust. But it was not just one ship. There were dozens of dreadnoughts, along with carriers, destroyers, and support vessels from every major military power in the galaxy. An entire combined fleet had been destroyed here. "Captain," Yuna said quietly, "I'm reading life signs." Every head on the bridge turned to look at her. "Life signs? In this graveyard?" She nodded, her face pale. "Faint, but definitely there, coming from that cluster of ships near the center of the field." Do-hyun made a quick decision. "Mina, can you get us close enough to send over a rescue shuttle?" "It'll be dangerous, sir. The gravitational fields are unstable. One wrong move and we could end up like those other ships." "Do it." The Indomitable crept forward through the ship graveyard. dodging floating debris and navigating around areas where space itself seemed to be folding in on itself. Finally, they reached a partially intact luminary vessel that was somehow still generating power. The rescue mission found 12 survivors huddled in the ship's emergency shelter. They were from 6 different species, all of them showing signs of severe trauma. But they were alive, and they had a story to tell. The survivor who seemed most coherent was a Zephyrian navigator named Talth. His usually bright blue skin was now a sickly gray color, and his hands shook as he spoke. "There were so many of them," he whispered. "Ships the size of moons, all connected together like they were alive. They didn't attack us right away. They just watched, studied us, like we were insects in a cage." Hyunwoo leaned forward. "How many ships did you count?" "Hundreds, maybe thousands. They were arranged in perfect formations, moving together like parts of a single organism. And in the center," Talth's voice broke. In the center was something that was not a ship at all. It was a world, a dark planet covered in machinery and organic growths. Dr. Yuna took notes frantically. Did they communicate? Did they make any demands? Talth shook his head. No words, no signals. They just released these clouds of tiny machines that began dissolving our ships from the outside in. We tried to fight back, but our weapons did nothing. The nanites absorbed the energy from our particle beams and used it to work faster. Another survivor, a Menthari psychic, spoke up in a voice filled with terror. I tried to read their minds. There was nothing there but hunger. Not the hunger for food or power or territory. Hunger for everything. They want to consume all matter, all energy, everything that exists. Captain Do-hyun felt his stomach drop. An enemy that could not be reasoned with, could not be bought off or negotiated with. An enemy whose only goal was the complete destruction of everything in the galaxy. "How did you survive?" he asked. "The attack was interrupted," Talth said. "Something made them stop. They detected something in deep space, and suddenly all their ships turned and moved away. They left us here to die slowly instead of finishing the job quickly." The survivors were transferred to the Indomitable and given medical care. But their stories had shaken everyone on the human ships. They were facing an enemy that had easily destroyed the galaxy's most powerful fleet. As they prepared to leave the graveyard, the ship's sensors detected something new. A massive energy signature was approaching from the direction of the outer rim. "Captain," Mina reported, her voice tight with fear. "I'm reading multiple contacts, large contacts. They're moving in formation." On the screen, dark shapes began to appear among the stars. Ships that looked more like living things than machines, covered in what appeared to be organic growths and metallic plates. They moved with purpose, like hunters following a scent. "How many?" Do-hyun asked. "I count 47 primary vessels. But, sir, the largest one, it's reading as over 50 kilometers across. It's not a ship. It's a mobile city. The Devourer fleet had found them. All ships, emergency jump preparation," Do-hyun ordered. "Plot a course for Earth, maximum speed." But as the human ships powered up their faster-than-light drives, something strange happened. The Devourer fleet stopped moving. The massive vessels hung motionless in space, as if they were studying the small human ships. For a long moment, both fleets faced each other across the void. Then slowly, one of the smaller Devourer ships began to approach. "Captain, should we fire?" Hyunwoo asked, his hand hovering over the weapons controls. "No. Let's see what they want." The alien ship came within a few hundred meters of the Indomitable, close enough that they could see details of its construction. It was covered in what looked like a mixture of metal and living tissue, with patterns of lights that pulsed like a heartbeat. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then the ship began transmitting on multiple frequencies. Not words or pictures, but complex mathematical equations and chemical formulas. "They're trying to communicate," Dr. Yuna said in amazement. "They want to talk to us." But before anyone could respond, The alien ship suddenly pulled back and rejoined its fleet. The entire Devourer force turned and began moving away, disappearing into the darkness between the stars. Why did they leave? Mina wondered aloud. Captain Do-Yun stared at the empty space where the massive fleet had been. I don't know, but I think we just learned something very important. The Devourers have never encountered anything like us before. We surprised them somehow. As the human ships jumped to faster-than-light speed, carrying their precious cargo of survivors and information back to Earth, none of them noticed the small probe that had detached from the Devourer fleet. It followed them at a safe distance, invisible to their sensors, learning everything it could about these strange new beings that had dared to enter the hunting grounds of the Devourers. The probe's mission was simple: discover what made humans different from every other species the Devourers had encountered. The answer to that question would determine the fate of not just humanity, but the entire galaxy. General Jinwoo stared at the holographic display floating above the conference table in the underground bunker beneath Seoul. The images were horrifying. Dissolved ships, empty star systems, and most disturbing of all, the recordings from Captain Do-Hyun's encounter with the Devourer fleet. Around the table sat Earth's top military leaders, scientists, and strategists. They had been meeting for 3 days straight, trying to find some way to defend against an enemy that seemed impossible to defeat. So far, every plan they came up with seemed hopeless. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, said Admiral Salmon, commander of Earth's space fleet. These Devourers have ships the size of cities, technology that can dissolve matter at the molecular level, and they've already destroyed civilizations that are thousands of years more advanced than us. Dr. Seo-hyun, Earth's leading expert in quantum physics, nodded grimly. The data from the probe samples shows their nanotechnology is beyond anything we thought possible. They can break down any type of matter and convert it into energy or raw materials. It's like they have the power to unmake reality itself. General Jinwoo rubbed his tired eyes. He had been awake for over 30 hours, reading reports and trying to find some weakness in the enemy. What about their numbers? How many ships are we talking about? Captain Do-Yun, who had returned from his mission just 2 days ago, stood up to address the room. Based on what the survivors told us and what our sensors detected, we estimate at least 2,000 major vessels. But, sir, that's not the worst part. They're organized. They move like parts of a single mind, perfectly coordinated across vast distances. The room fell silent. 2,000 ships, each one capable of destroying entire fleets. It was a force that could crush every military in the galaxy combined. So what are our options? Asked Dr. Minjun, the head of Earth's weapons research program. We could evacuate to the far colonies, try to hide until they pass through our region of space. Hide where? Admiral Soman replied. They've already reached the Outer Rim territories. At their current speed, they'll be in our sector within 6 months. There's nowhere to run that they won't eventually find us. Young communications engineer. Jae-hyun had been quiet during most of the meeting, studying the audio recordings from the Devourer encounter. Now he looked up with a puzzled expression. General, I've been analyzing the transmissions the Devourers sent to Captain Do-Hyun's ship. There's something strange about them. Everyone turned to look at the 24-year-old engineer. He was the newest member of the team, fresh out of university, but he had already proven himself brilliant at understanding alien communication patterns. What did you find? General Jinwoo asked. Jae-hyun activated his tablet and projected a complex waveform onto the main display. At first, I thought these were just mathematical equations and chemical formulas. But when I analyzed the underlying patterns, I found something else. Emotional indicators. Dr. Seo-hyun frowned. Emotional indicators? You mean they have feelings? Not exactly feelings as we understand them, Jae-hyun explained. But there are patterns in their transmissions that suggest something like desperation, urgency, and underlying it all, what I can only describe as hunger. Not the hunger for food, but the hunger of someone who is starving and running out of time. The room erupted in confused voices. Admiral Soman stood up, looking skeptical. You're saying these monsters that have destroyed 14 civilizations are desperate? What could they possibly be desperate for? Jae-hyun switched to another display showing signal patterns over time. I compared their transmissions with the movement data from the ship graveyards. Look at this pattern. They don't attack randomly. They target specific types of worlds first. High-energy civilizations, species with advanced technology, worlds with large populations. Dr. Seo-hyun leaned forward, studying the data. They're being selective, but why? If they can dissolve any type of matter, why not just consume everything equally? Because they're not conquerors, Jae-hyun said quietly. They're refugees. The silence that followed was deafening. General Jinwoo stared at the young engineer as if he had lost his mind. Refugees? He said slowly. These creatures that have wiped out entire star systems are refugees? Jae-hyun nodded, his voice gaining confidence as he explained his theory. Think about it, sir. They have incredible technology, ships the size of moons, perfect coordination. This isn't a species that evolved to be aggressive. This is a species that evolved to survive something worse. Dr. Seo-hyun was now studying the data intently. You're suggesting they're running from something? More than that, Jae-hyun replied. I think they're trying to build something. A defense, maybe? Or a weapon? They're gathering resources and energy for a purpose we don't understand yet. Captain Do-hyun spoke up. That would explain why they stopped when they saw our ships. We don't fit the pattern of what they're looking for. We're too small, too primitive to be useful for whatever they're building. General Jinwoo felt a strange mixture of hope and terror. If Jae-hyun was right, then maybe the Devourers could be reasoned with. But it also meant there was something out there so dangerous that it had turned an advanced civilization into desperate scavengers. Even if you're right, Admiral Soman said, how does this help us? They're still destroying civilizations. They're still heading toward Earth. Dr. Seo-hyun was now pacing around the room, her mind racing. What if we could communicate with them properly? What if we could find out what they're really trying to accomplish? And then what? Asked Dr. Minjun. Ask them politely to stop eating civilizations? No, Dr. Seo-hyun said, stopping in the middle of the room. We help them. The suggestion was so shocking that several people started talking at once. General Jinwoo raised his hand for silence. Explain, he said simply. Dr. Seo-hyun took a deep breath. If they're refugees, if they're building some kind of defense against a greater threat, then that threat is our problem too. Whatever made the Devourers desperate enough to destroy civilizations will eventually come for us as well. Jae-hyun nodded enthusiastically. That's why they were interested in our ships. We approached them instead of running away. We tried to communicate instead of attacking. Maybe we're the first species they've met that might actually be willing to help instead of just being consumed. Captain Do-hyun looked thoughtful. The survivors said the Devourers stopped their attack when they detected something in deep space. What if that something is what they're really afraid of? General Jinwoo felt the pieces of a terrifying puzzle clicking into place. You're talking about making contact with an enemy that has destroyed 14 civilizations and asking them to be our allies against something even worse. Yes, sir, Dr. Seo-hyun said firmly. Because if we don't, we're going to face both threats, eventually. And I'd rather face the unknown with the Devourers as allies than face the Devourers as enemies and then face whatever they're running from alone. The room fell quiet as everyone considered the implications. It was a plan so risky, it bordered on insanity. But every other option they had discussed led to certain destruction. Admiral Soman shook her head. Even if we wanted to try this, how would we make contact? We don't know where they are or how to communicate with them properly. General Jinwoo looked at the faces around the table. Scientists, soldiers, engineers, all of them looking to him for a decision that could save or doom humanity. "We bring them to us," he said finally. The room erupted in shocked voices again. Captain Do-Yun stared at his commander in disbelief. "Sir, you can't be serious." "I'm completely serious," General Jinwoo replied. "We broadcast a signal into space, a message that tells them exactly where Earth is and invites them to come here for a conversation." Dr. Minjun stood up, his face pale. "General, that's suicide. If you're wrong about them being reasonable, you'll be handing Earth to them on a silver plate." "And if I'm right," General Jinwoo said calmly, "we might save not just Earth, but the entire galaxy from something far worse than the Devourers." He looked around the room one more time. "I'm calling this Operation Lighthouse. We're going to light a beacon in the darkness and see what comes to investigate. Dr. Seo-hyun, I want you to work with Jae-hyun to design a message that will get their attention. Something that shows we understand they're not just mindless destroyers." As the meeting broke up and people hurried off to begin preparations for the most dangerous gamble in human history, General Jinwoo remained behind, staring at the holographic display of the Devourer fleet. In 3 days, Earth would broadcast a signal that would announce their location to every Devourer ship in the galaxy. They would invite creatures capable of dissolving planets to come and have a conversation. It was either the bravest or the most foolish decision ever made. General Jinwoo suspected it might be both. Ambassador Kiwon floated in the observation deck of the space station Harmony, watching the edge of human space with nervous eyes. It had been 4 days since Earth broadcast the message into deep space. 4 days of waiting to see if humanity had just signed its own death warrant. The message had been surprisingly simple. Using the mathematical patterns that Jae-hyun had decoded from the Devourer transmissions, they had sent 3 basic concepts. "We understand you are hungry. We understand you are afraid. We want to help." Now all they could do was wait and see what would answer. "Ambassador," called Lieutenant Sunwoo from the communications station, "I'm picking up massive gravitational distortions at the edge of our sensor range. Something big is coming." Kiwon felt his stomach tighten. Around him, the small diplomatic team that had volunteered for this mission prepared for what might be their final moments. Dr. Yuna was checking her translation equipment one more time. Communications specialist Boram was running diagnostics on every system they had for making contact with alien species. Through the station's windows, Kiwon could see Earth's entire military fleet spread out in defensive positions. Every ship humanity had built was here, ready to fight a hopeless battle if the first contact went wrong. It was not much compared to the fleets of older civilizations, but it was everything Earth could offer. "Contact visual," Sunwoo reported, putting it on main screen. The display lit up with an image that made everyone on the station go silent. A single ship was approaching, but calling it a ship was like calling a mountain a rock. The vessel was easily 20 kilometers long and covered in what looked like living metal that pulsed with internal light. Organic growths twisted around mechanical structures in patterns that hurt to look at directly. But strangest of all, the massive ship was moving slowly, almost carefully. This was not the approach of a predator. This was the approach of something that was just as nervous as they were. "It stopped," Sunwoo announced. "Distance approximately 1 million kilometers. Just sitting there." Kiwon stared at the alien vessel on the screen. After everything they had heard about the Devourers, he had expected something more aggressive. Instead, the ship seemed to be waiting politely for permission to come closer. "Open a communication channel," he ordered. "All frequencies." The next few hours were an exercise in patience and frustration. The humans tried every method of communication they knew. Radio signals, laser pulses, mathematical sequences, even simple pictures. The alien ship responded to some attempts, but the responses made no sense. It was Dr. Yuna who finally made the breakthrough. She had been studying the patterns of lights that moved across the alien ship's hull and realized they were not random decorations. They were a form of writing. "The lights are words," she explained excitedly. "But not words for objects or actions. They're words for concepts, emotions, states of being." Using her translation program, she managed to decode the first message from the alien ship. It was a single concept: curiosity. The ship was curious about them. Working together, the human team slowly built up a basic vocabulary of light patterns. It was exhausting work. Each concept had to be established through dozens of examples and cross-references. But gradually, communication began to happen. The alien ship identified itself with a pattern that Dr. Yuna translated as "keeper of the last memory." When the humans asked what it was the keeper of, the response was a complex pattern that seemed to mean everything that was lost. Kiwan felt a chill run down his spine. "Ask it why it came here." The response took several minutes to decode. When Dr. Yuna finally translated it, her face went pale. "It says it came because we are the first species it has encountered in 10,000 cycles that chose to seek instead of flee. It wants to know why we are not afraid." "Tell it we are afraid," Kiwan replied. "But we choose to face our fear instead of running from it." There was a long pause after they transmitted this message. Then the alien ship began moving closer. Not aggressively, but like someone approaching a friend they had not seen in a very long time. As the massive vessel drew near, more details became visible. The organic growths were not random. They were structures, buildings, gardens even. This was not just a ship. It was a city, a world, carrying the remnants of an entire civilization. "Ambassador," Dr. Yuna said quietly, "it's asking permission to send over a representative." Kiwan looked around at his small team. They were about to become the first humans, to meet a devourer face to face. If they were wrong about these creatures being reasonable, they would all be dead within the hour. "Tell it yes," he said. A small craft detached from the massive ship and approached the station. It was beautiful in an alien way, looking more grown than built, with smooth curves and surfaces that seemed to shift color in the light. The docking process was surprisingly gentle. The alien craft connected to their station with barely a vibration. Then they waited. The airlock cycled, and Ambassador Kiwan got his first look at a devourer. It was not what he had expected. The creature was tall, maybe 3 meters, but it moved with a strange grace. Its body seemed to be made of both metal and flesh, with circuits running under transparent skin like glowing veins. Most disturbing were its eyes, which held an intelligence that was both ancient and desperately sad. "I am called Keeper," it said, its voice coming from speakers built into its chest rather than from any visible mouth. "I am the last of my kind to retain individual consciousness. The others have joined the collective mind to better coordinate our survival." Dr. Yuna stepped forward, her translation equipment recording everything. "We are honored to meet you, Keeper. We want to understand why you consume other civilizations." The alien's eyes dimmed with what might have been pain. "Consume is not the correct word. We gather. We preserve. Each species we encounter, we try to save some part of them before the true destroyers arrive." Kiwan felt his blood run cold. "True. Destroyers?" Keeper moved to the observation window and pointed out into the darkness between the stars. "They come from the void between galaxies. We call them the Void Hunters. They do not consume matter like we do. They consume reality itself, unmaking entire dimensions, leaving nothing but empty space where once there were worlds, stars, even time itself." The room fell silent as the horrible truth sank in. The devourers were not the real enemy. They were trying to save what they could from something infinitely worse. "How long do we have?" Kiwan asked. "Their advanced scouts have already reached the outer edge of this galaxy," Keeper replied. "We estimate 6 months before they begin their true assault. We have been trying to gather enough matter and energy to build a barrier, something that might stop them or at least slow them down." Dr. Yuna was taking notes frantically. Is that why you've been dissolving civilizations? To get materials for this barrier? Keeper's form seemed to sag with exhaustion. We tried to ask at first. We tried to explain the danger. But every species we encountered either attacked us immediately or fled in terror. We had no choice but to take what we needed to save the galaxy. But you're not taking anything from us, Kiwan observed. Because you are different, Keeper said, turning to look at him with those ancient, sad eyes. You chose to communicate instead of fight or flee. You offered to help instead of demanding we leave. In 10,000 years of desperate flight across the cosmos, you were the first species to show us something we had forgotten existed. What's that? Kiwan asked. Hope, Keeper replied simply. The belief that impossible problems might have solutions. We had given up hope long ago. We were simply trying to delay the inevitable destruction for as long as possible. But seeing your small ships approach our fleet instead of running away reminded us that there might be another way. Ambassador Kiwan looked out at the human fleet. Tiny vessels spread across space in a futile defensive formation. Then he looked at the massive alien ship that carried the last remnants of a civilization older than human history. What if we work together? He asked. Instead of you taking what you need from other species, what if we convince them to give it willingly, united the galaxy against this common threat? Keeper stared at him for a long moment. Then, for the first time since it had arrived, the alien's eyes brightened with something that might have been hope. You would do this? Try to unite species that have been enemies for millennia? Convince civilizations to work together against a threat they cannot even comprehend? Kiwan smiled. Keeper, you've never met humans before, have you? We specialize in doing impossible things. Outside the station, both human and alien ships hung motionless in space, their crews waiting to see what would come of this historic meeting. They were about to find out if two very different species could work together to save not just the galaxy, but reality itself. The Galactic Council chamber had never seen anything like it. Ambassador Hannah stood once again at the center of the great room, but this time she was not alone. Beside her, the towering figure of Keeper cast strange shadows under the chambers. Lights. Behind them both, Captain Do-hyun and Ambassador Kiwan waited with data that would change everything. The assembled delegates stared in shock and fear. Many had weapons trained on Keeper, despite the peace flags that had been raised. Some species had refused to attend at all, choosing instead to continue their desperate evacuations. You brought one of them here? Ambassador Vorthak of the Luminary demanded, his energy form flickering with anger. Have you lost your minds? This creature's people have destroyed entire civilizations. Kiwan stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. And now we know why. Keeper, please show them what you showed us. The alien activated a device built into its arm. The air above the chamber filled with holographic images that made even the bravest delegates gasp in horror. Dark shapes moved between the stars, but these were not ships. They were tears in space itself, wounds in reality that consumed everything they touched. Behold the Void Hunters, Keeper said, its mechanical voice echoing through the silent chamber. They have consumed 17 galaxies in their journey across the universe. They do not want territory or resources. They want to unmake existence itself, returning everything to the void from which it came. The images showed worlds simply ceasing to exist, not destroyed, not consumed, but deleted from reality as if they had never been. Entire star systems vanished, leaving behind spaces where even the laws of physics seemed to break down. This is impossible, whispered the Mentheri representative, her psychic voice filled with terror. Nothing can simply delete reality. They can, Keeper replied sadly. My people discovered them at the edge of our galaxy 50,000 years ago. We tried to fight them with the greatest weapons ever created. We tried to hide in dimensions beyond their reach. We tried to negotiate, to reason, to bargain. Nothing worked. They cannot be stopped by any single species, no matter how advanced. Ambassador Vorthak's energy form dimmed. Then why are you here? Why bring this doom to our attention if nothing can be done? Captain Do-hyun activated his own display, showing technical readouts that made the scientists in the chamber lean forward with interest. Because Keeper's people found something that might work. Not a weapon, but a barrier. A way to push the Void Hunters back into the empty space between galaxies where they belong. Dr. Seo-yun, who had arrived with the human delegation, stood up to address the chamber. The mathematics are incredible. By combining quantum field manipulation with psychic resonance and dimensional folding, we can create a barrier that exists in multiple realities at once. The Void Hunters won't be able to simply delete it because it exists in dimensions they cannot reach. But it requires resources from every advanced civilization in the galaxy, Keeper added. Not just materials, but knowledge, technology, and, most importantly, cooperation on a scale never before attempted. The chamber erupted in arguments. Species that had been enemies for centuries would have to work together. Civilizations would have to share their most closely guarded secrets. It was asking for the impossible. "Why should we trust you?" demanded the Corvin representative. "Your people have murdered billions. You dissolved entire worlds." Keeper's ancient, eyes filled with what might have been tears. "Because we had no choice. We tried to explain the danger, but every species either attacked us or fled. We were running out of time, and we chose to save some rather than lose all. We preserved genetic samples, cultural records, even consciousness patterns from every species we encountered. They are not dead. They wait within our ships, hoping for a chance to live again." The revelation sent shockwaves through the chamber. The Devourers had not been destroying civilizations. They had been trying to save them, storing them away until the galaxy could be made safe again. Ambassador Hana, who had been quiet through most of the discussion, finally spoke. "My people's homeworld was one of the first to be threatened. We begged for help, and only the humans answered. Now I understand why. Humans do not see impossible problems. They see challenges waiting to be solved." Kaiwan stepped into the center of the chamber. "Every species here has something unique to contribute. The Luminari have mastery over energy. The Menthari can link minds across vast distances. The Zephyrians have the fastest ships. The Corvin Empire has the strongest defenses. Alone, none of us can face the Void Hunters. Together, we might have a chance." "And if we fail?" asked the Zephyrian representative. "Then we face extinction anyway," Kiwan replied simply. "But if we succeed, we save not just our galaxy, but every galaxy the Void Hunters might threaten in the future." The debate continued for hours. Old enemies argued with each other. Ancient grudges were brought up and dismissed. Some species walked out, refusing to participate. Others demanded guarantees that could not be given. But slowly, gradually, something remarkable began to happen. The younger delegates, the ones who had grown up hearing stories of galactic cooperation rather than ancient wars, began to speak up. They talked about what they could accomplish together rather than what divided them. The turning point came when the Menthari representative made mental contact with Keeper. Through the psychic link, she experienced the aliens' memories directly, the desperate flight across space, the horror of watching entire galaxies consumed by the void, the terrible decision to sacrifice some in hopes of saving all. When she broke the connection, she was weeping. "They speak the truth," she announced to the chamber. "I have seen their memories. They are not monsters. They are the survivors of the greatest tragedy in cosmic history, trying to prevent it from happening again." One by one, the delegates began to agree to the plan. Not all of them. Some species continued to refuse, choosing to flee to distant galaxies rather than fight. But enough agreed to make the attempt possible. The construction of the barrier took 4 months. It was the greatest engineering project in galactic history. Luminary energy experts worked alongside human quantum physicists. Menthari psychics linked their minds with Corvan military strategists. Zephyrian ships carried materials at speeds that broke every existing record. And at the center of it all, Keeper's people worked to restore the civilizations they had preserved. Worlds that had been dissolved were rebuilt. Species that had been thought extinct walked again under alien suns. The Devourer's ships opened like flowers, releasing billions of beings who had been sleeping in quantum storage, waiting for the galaxy to be safe again. The Void Hunters arrived exactly when Keeper had predicted. They came not as ships or armies, but as tears in space itself, wounds in reality that spread like infection across the cosmos. The barrier held. It was not a single wall, but a web of interconnected fields that existed in 17 different dimensions, simultaneously. When the Void Hunters tried to delete one layer, the others reinforced it. When they attempted to find gaps in the defense, the psychic network detected them instantly and redirected energy to block their approach. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted 3 days. The Void Hunters pressed against the barrier, with forces that made stars tremble. Reality itself seemed to flex and bend under the assault. But the combined will and knowledge of hundreds of species held firm. On the 3rd day, the tiers in space began to close. The Void Hunters, faced with a defense they could not overcome, retreated back into the emptiness between galaxies. In the aftermath, as the galaxy began to rebuild and species thought lost forever returned to their homeworlds, Ambassador Hana addressed the reformed Galactic Council one final time. "We asked for help when our worlds were threatened," she said, looking directly at the human delegation. "We expected warriors or sages or ancient powers to answer our call. Instead, we found something far more valuable. We found a species that refused to accept that some problems have no solutions." She paused, her crystal form glowing with colors that meant gratitude and hope. "The humans taught us that the word impossible simply means we have not found the right answer yet. They showed us that cooperation is stronger than competition, that hope is more powerful than fear. They saved not just our galaxy, but our faith in what civilized beings can accomplish when they work together." As the delegates dispersed to return to their worlds, Keeper approached Kiwan one final time. The ancient alien's eyes no longer held the desperate sadness that had defined it for so long. "Your species has given mine something we thought was lost forever," it said. "What's that?" Kiwan asked. "A future," Keeper replied. "For the first time in 50,000 years, we can imagine. Tomorrow without fear, we can dream of what we might build instead of what we might lose." As Keeper's ship departed for the newly restored Devourer homeworlds, humanity looked out at a galaxy transformed. Species that had been enemies for millennia were now allies. Civilizations thought extinct were being reborn. And at the center of it all was a simple truth that would echo through the cosmos for ages to come. Sometimes the greatest strength is not the power to destroy, but the wisdom to refuse to give up hope.